Welcome back to Keeping Ag Real. This is your hostess, Jenny Schweigert. I'm a mom, wife, agricultural consultant, and brand manager. I want to start out today by saying thank you for downloading this episode and others. You can stay up to date with new episodes by subscribing through two of my favorite podcasting apps. Those are Podkicker and Podbean. From those apps, search for Keeping Ag Real. And as part of the Farm and Rural Ag Network, you can also find new episodes of Keeping Ag Real and other fantastic podcasts by searching and subscribing to Farm Rural Ag Network. Well, let's get started. Today's guest is joining us all the way from Ireland. He is one of the most worldly individuals that I've been fortunate to know. He's had the opportunity to visit and observe food preferences, food trends, behaviors in countless countries and cultures. It is my pleasure to welcome Aiden Connelly. Aiden is the Chief Innovation Officer and Vice President of Corporate Accounts at Alltech. Finally, I want to say thank you to Alltech for working with Keeping Ag Real to make today's episode possible. Let's go ahead and join the interview.
That I got here a few hours ago. I was in the Netherlands this morning, and I was in Russia yesterday, and I was in China or Taiwan or something before that. So, yes.
Oh, my goodness.
It's been a bit of a roller coaster.
Well, there's certainly no doubt about that, and I do truly appreciate you finding time in your schedule to share with our listeners. Sadly, the Alltech family recently lost Dr. Pierce Lyons, the founder and a true pioneer in agricultural innovation. And I would like to express my condolences for what has become a huge loss to so many.
Yeah, we appreciate that. I mean, he's obviously was a very unique individual. Nobody has ever been somebody like Dr. Lyons, and clearly what he did for agriculture and food production was quite extraordinary. And I think the outpouring that we've received from customers, competitors, from people in the industry of all types, just shows how many people he touched. I would suppose most individuals probably get the chance to touch. They claim that we can meet about 80,000 people in our lifetime. It would be no exaggeration to say Dr. Lyons met at least 1 million, and more importantly, it feels like 1 million people have a story about him to tell. So that's something that I think I can't think of any other individual in agriculture who had that impact.
You are so right. From my own experience, I've had the opportunity to meet him several times, just in passing, and he always remembers who I am. I don't know if he remembers my name per se. He always remembered my face, which I think is very telling to his charisma and outreach to network and get to know so many individuals.
No, well, of course, you are a very memorable person, so,
well,
so I'm not surprised he remembers you, but there are a few others that he'd remember that you wouldn't normally remember, that's for sure.
Let's jump into talking about Alltech's one event that's scheduled for May 19th through the 22nd in Lexington, Kentucky. Can you give us the history behind the symposiums and how things evolved to what the experience is all about today?
Yeah, well, I think that the conference itself started the way that all conferences do. It was an idea. It was a decision in the very early days of Alltech by Dr. Lyons that he wanted to give people the opportunity to talk about the newest technologies. And it's always been the conference that's perhaps challenged what we think about agriculture. So it was the first conference I know of where people talked about antibiotic-free, the first conference I know of where they talked about the use of enzymes to get more nutrition, more nutrients out of feed. First conference I know of where you actually had a proper review of what yeast did, as in its mode of action, how it worked in the digestion of cows. So it started with that idea. And then it branched into species that you didn't think about, like feeding animals in a zoo, feeding bees, feeding fish, what you could do for your pets.
Sure.
And so kind of classically moved to the broader nutritional pieces. In recent years, it's absolutely reflective of the fact that agriculture is beholden to a lot of interests that we never thought we'd have to pay attention to. Not least amongst those are clearly things relating to what consumers think about the food chain, what the government is doing to regulate our business, how NGOs are influencing some of the decisions we take, what we can do with respect to technology. So that's very exciting, and that has certainly meant that we've had to bring a broader range of speakers in as well to reflect that.
The event is truly the nexus of some of the most diverse topics that I've seen at any conference or symposium. For those who may not be familiar with the session offerings, the symposium is built on three main pillars: agriculture, business, and lifestyle. Under agriculture, there's 6 different categories, and then underneath each of those categories, there are multiple session offerings. The categories in agriculture are aquaculture, beef, crop science, dairy, pigs, and poultry. One that really caught my eye is under crop science, and it's addressing the reliance on glyphosate. I also have a tough decision to make over in the business of food category. Lots of topics associated with technology influences on food. And then in the lifestyle pillar, there are 3 additional categories. Health and wellness is one that I'm also interested in. It's an impressive lineup. What about the keynote speakers? What can we expect on that front?
Obviously, we're missing the keynote speaker that we'd like to have there in Dr. Lyons, but it's probably the strongest list of speakers we've ever had. We will have Dr. Mark Lyons, who is Dr. Lyons' son, and of course he will be kicking off the opening session. Alongside that, we've Bill Northerly, who is the Undersecretary to Agriculture, so he's clearly a very dynamic speaker as well. We have speaking from the Kellogg's Innovation Network, which is part of the Kellogg's Business School in Northwestern. We're going to have Robert Walcott, and he is going to be addressing the whole area of how companies, farmers, institutions innovate, how you embrace innovation. And that will be followed by our pitches from our startups. We have this year 10 startups, 5 external to Alltech and 5 internal to Alltech, so like entrepreneurs. And these will talk about business ideas that we think will transform agriculture. In the Tuesday session, the Tuesday afternoon session, should I say, we are going to have also some exciting speakers, including from Harvard's Business School. We have Professor David Bell. Professor Bell is at Harvard, has been there for about 35 or 40 years, has served on the boards of many very large agribusiness companies around the world, but most importantly has been teaching the agribusiness programs. He's going to take us through every year. It's the number 1 revenue generator of Harvard all year, the agribusiness program, and they run about between 12 and 14 cases on leading food and agricultural companies. And he's going to select the 10 best of those, or as he put it, the 10 most interesting of those. So we'll get some insights into Nestle and Danone and what's happening with respect to John Deere, what's happening with respect to Monsanto, those sorts of cases. Plus, of course, there's always new technology. And we have Rodolphe Barangou, who's been said to be one of 4 people that will likely to receive the Nobel Prize when Nobel Prize is awarded for CRISPR. CRISPR is gene editing. We talk about its ability to replace genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, because it does what GM technology can do, but at a fraction of the cost and much faster. So probably the broadest range of speakers we've ever had outside of the core speakers, and you've already mentioned the business of food, the business of business, the session on dairy, the session on beef, and of course all of the various species are represented by their own individual sessions.
You mentioned CRISPR, which is actually one of the reasons that I continue to come back. Aside from the networking opportunities, I'm drawn to the event's likeness to a crystal ball. Let me indulge for just a bit, and I promise it will make sense. The event has challenged me every single year. 3 specific topic examples are microbes, CRISPR, and the prediction about brick and mortar grocery stores. The best reaction following a symposium is documented in a blog post that is in alltech.com, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. The thought was that within the next decade, the grocery stores as we know them today will be nearly extinct. In my mind, that was preposterous until a few weeks after Symposium, when, lo and behold, Amazon decides to purchase Whole Foods.
There you go.
That was the sign that you all might be on to something. I did begin to rethink the theory, and today do agree that it is plausible. So after that happened, I felt obliged to write a blog post.
Well, I know that I've also had the opportunity to meet with groups of younger people, and I wrote a blog, as you know, talking about the phrase they used, which was our grocery stores, childcare for the elderly. In essence, even if you look at what's happened with Walmart in the last 24 hours, if you look at what's happened with respect to some of the consolidation taking place in the supermarkets in the UK, everything at the moment indicates that there are huge changes. Now, whether those changes lead to discontinuation of the bricks and mortar model, that's something we'll wait and see. But what's absolutely clear is that food will not be sold, delivered to consumers in the same way in the future as it has been until now.
It certainly is an element within the food system that I'm anxious to watch. And I anticipate there will be more learning opportunities at this year's ONE event. For anyone that's interested, is that in the business of food?
Yes, yeah. So the business of food is very much allowing people, not only from farming background, but also encouraging people to come from the larger grocery stores in this country. You mentioned Whole Foods, but obviously you've got Kroger's and Wegmans and others who have seen the symposium as a place for ideas about farming, but also want the opportunity to talk about what's going on in their own business and to explain that to us. So I think that's going to be very exciting. The business of business is because we all need to understand what the latest ideas are with respect to how to make money.
There's a session from last year's business of food category that has really stuck with me, and it's because of the audience in the room. The room was filled with farmers, ranchers, food processors, I believe restaurant owners, dietitians, scientists, and agribusiness professionals. It was a unique and refreshing audience, and one that I hope to see more of at events. Can you talk about why all of these individuals are your target audience?
I think that firstly, in a way that we've never had before, we're seeing restrictions, Jenny, in terms of what we can use and how we use it. And a lot of that, unfortunately, again, is being led by the Europeans, but not necessarily only by the Europeans. We also see diseases that we've never seen before, and both viral and bacterial, and those are affecting plants. You think about citrus greening, you think about the problems of using the pesticides that are required to be used in bananas, you think of some of the diseases that we're seeing in some of the crops, row crops. So we're looking for novel ways to address those, and being able to support the immune system of a plant, being able to support the ecosystem of the soil. You know, they say that if you take a spoonful of soil, you have as many microorganisms as you have people on the planet. In other words, about 7 billion. That's an ecosystem which is in balance all the time, and maybe these mechanisms or these ways that we've done in the past of using things that kill, chemical, pesticides, insecticides, etc. Maybe that isn't the right way, and maybe we do need to be trying to use nature to support nature. In any case, all very interesting topic. The level of science has continued to grow. You see many of the top companies involved in seeds and agrochemicals are now very active in this area as well. So I'm expecting that to be a very exciting session as well.
Let's change gears and discuss the Pierce Lyons Accelerator, which is a mentorship program for ag tech startups. During the year, you select 10 startups, facilitate a quote-unquote business boot camp, and then highlight those startups at ONE. One of the startups which really stood out to me last year is MagGrow. Can you share the goals of this program and talk a little bit about MagGrow to give an example of the type of companies you're working with?
Yeah, well, the startup area is one that's exciting to us because we are not taking shareholdings in those companies. We don't have a financial interest in them, but we do have an interest in making sure that they're successful. They are bringing technologies that will make our customers more money, and those are the people listening to this podcast today, and of course are going to be attending our symposium. Specifically, MagGrow came up with the idea of magnetizing liquid products, making it easy for them to stick to the leaves, plants that they were being sprayed on, and that reduces drift. It has a dramatic effect on the amount that you need to use. You can obviously reduce the application rate, and you also reduce the risks of that ending up maybe away from the plant in places where it shouldn't be, potentially run off into streams, water, etc. So all of that has led to that company being valued now, I believe, at about $60 million, with a very good chance that it will go on to become what they call a unicorn, a $1 billion valuation. And I would still say from last year's cohort, that's the most exciting. But there have been others. AgriWeb, which is a company that creates a platform for you to be able to better manage your farm, understand better pasture management, has now expanded into looking at animal management in more intensive farming situations, and is active in the UK. It's looking at action. It's active in Brazil. Both of those are directly a consequence of the symposium attendance last year. Moo Call, this was the idea of putting a sensor on the tail of a cow so that you can tell when she is going to calf. Again, valuation of that company has increased about fivefold since it came on the accelerator. They've received business orders from all around the world, not least China. So I think it's very exciting from our perspective to believe that the symposium is a place that you go to get new ideas, and that when you come back with those new ideas, they're going to make your farm more profitable. And not least also, I believe, from those startups' perspectives, they can hopefully expect to receive more business to become successful themselves. So all 10 ideas that will be on stage, they'll be very brief, as they have been before. The pitches are about 3.5 minutes long. It will lead to a lot of discussion and a lot of activity on the floor. But it's all part of the same piece, which is the one conference is an ideas conference, is a thought leadership conference. It's a place where you go when your job is to be in the business of making more business and making more money for your farm and your future.
What advice do you have for anyone out there that has a startup and might be interested in Accelerator? And then can you explain the process and the timeline?
Well, at the moment, we have a call for proposals or for companies that are interested in participating in it, and that occurs in August, September. So this year we scanned about 100 companies. The previous year we had more. So over the 2 years, probably actually close to 300 companies have been reviewed who are involved in ag tech and have got technologies that we believe are worthwhile. Some that came this year were repeats from last year. So in other words, the fact of not making it into the cohort, into the program on 1 year does not prevent you from applying the following year if you've moved on, if your technology has moved on to the next level. We are very open about what types of technologies we'll look at, so long as we feel that they are agricultural in their nature. We're not looking, in other words, for food technologies per se. We're looking for technologies that would appeal to farmers of whatever type, either helping a farmer farm or maybe it's a type of farming in itself. But in essence, again, we would like to think that those will stimulate people to think differently about how food is produced and maybe see opportunities that they wouldn't have seen otherwise, either directly with the company or in something that maybe runs alongside of that.
I loved meeting with the Moo Call startup. He promised me that he's working on a U-Call, which will really help me out during lambing.
Yes.
It's incredibly generous of Alltech to offer this coaching and utilize the extensive networking opportunities, which one may argue is equally valuable as the business coaching.
Well, that's perhaps something we didn't realize had such value for them. But the 10 companies, we've opened our, call it Rolodex, but of course nowadays it's more like a LinkedIn page, said to them, who do you need to meet? Who would you like to talk to? For startups, that's probably one of the most valuable parts of the whole process is they can't get a cup of coffee with the head of a large food company or integrator. And I've made the comment, as you probably heard me say on stage, to companies that attend the one, I've said, I know that you want to challenge the startups, you want to push them hard, you want to explain to them why their technology mightn't be as strong as it should be and maybe isn't going to succeed. But in fact, that's not really helpful. we need to be encouraging these people. We know that their technologies are not yet entirely ready for market in many cases and need help, certainly need help in terms of implementation, understanding how best to use it. Perhaps, as you've just described, there might be something they haven't thought about already in terms of an application, a parallel application. So we need to be working with startups in a way that perhaps we haven't in the past. Maybe we've been a lot more confrontational in agriculture when suppliers arrive with a new idea and saying, well, why should I use this? What's the purpose of this? My grandfather, my great-grandfather didn't need it. Why do I need to work with this new idea? But that's not, in my view, particularly with startups being so small, with such limited resources, the best way to approach it. And we'd like to think that the One Conference is part of a way for people to realize that they can be active in terms of helping promote innovation within agribusiness, within agriculture, and allowing us to receive or have technologies that perhaps would never see the light of day otherwise.
Ideas do change everything, and there's no doubt that ideas will be in high supply during this year's symposium. So I would be remiss not to mention brewing and the distilling part of Alltech. Can you share a little bit about that?
Obviously, the beer business has been near and dear to the Lyons family. That's where Dr. Lyons started his career, and Mark Lyons did his PhD also in the brewing area. So we have our own brewery. In fact, we have two at this stage. We have one in Kentucky, and we've got one in Ireland. Mm-hmm. We produce a very large range of beers, and as such, we have decided we will support a beer fair, which we will be doing directly before the symposium, before the one starts. And that will have, I believe, around 300 or 400 beers competing for the first prize.
Oh, exciting.
There will be, of course, prize in every category. And not least, we will be serving the beer all the way through the program as well. So it's just a very nice to know that the expertise of Alltech with respect to yeast, how yeast works in animals to improve digestion, is also being applied to produce some of the best beer in the world.
Speaking of yeast and animal digestion, one of the coolest experiences I think that I have had at Alltech is touring the algae plant, which is really unique in that it used to be a Budweiser brewing facility. And you continue to use yeast at the facility, but to grow algae. How does that work?
Well, the technology is always has some of the same roots, which is that you're trying to ferment to allow yeast to grow, and that growing of yeast, of course, as a byproduct can produce alcohol or not, depending on which strain of yeast you use, etc. So yes, the fermenters that were used to produce the Budweiser different products that they were making in Kentucky were repurposed and became the reasons why we got involved with the algae factory in Winchester. We continue to be very interested in the fact that you can use fermenters to produce algae, and we've done the same thing with some of our fermenters in Brazil. We, of course, have the world's largest yeast factory dedicated to animals down there. It's the same idea that you're growing the organism inside in a tank, you're feeding it with sugar, clean water, putting in some heat, and as it grows, it produces some of these wonderful different products that we can use in animals to make the animals happier, healthier, and perform better.
So are we talking about omega-3 fatty acids, DHA?
Yeah, well, no, DHA is obviously very interesting from the perspective of human health. And I think even people have been seeing some of the reports in the last couple of weeks about fish oil, and is fish oil really as valuable as everybody says? Well, it's the DHA in the fish oil that's the critical part, not even the omega-3. It's the DHA, which is part of that omega-3 that we need to be consuming. And you can get that from algae. Certain strains of algae have higher levels than others. And we've been very focused on that because if you get algae into the animal is healthier. And if you get algae into the animal and it puts it into its milk, meat, or eggs, that makes that produce better for us to consume.
What's most fascinating to me, and kind of a fun fact that I don't believe many people know about, is the fish is really kind of just a transporter. It's the algae that they're consuming that we ultimately are striving to obtain. So the idea of supplementing with algae becomes important when you're talking about things like mercury consumption and overfishing.
Yeah, so absolutely, the critical issue we're facing as a world is that there just aren't that many fish in the sea, and every year we want to eat more fish. So we obviously need to find ways to replace some of those fish, and farming is a good idea, but in order to make fish grow well, we often end up feeding them little fish, usually by harvesting those little fish out of the sea and then cooking them up into meal and using that meal with as fish meal to feed fish. Well, that's just not sustainable longer term. And so we've already been trying to find ways to use lower and lower levels of fish meal. But the fish meal contains the DHA that you've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important for those fish from a health perspective. And in fact, it makes fish that when we eat is good for us. So there's two reasons for getting DHA into the fish. And both of those lead back to the same answer, which is we need more algae.
Many of the ideas and innovations that Aiden has touched on today, you can experience by attending one, which is scheduled for May 20th through the 22nd in Lexington, Kentucky. How can someone go and register for the 118 Symposium?
Yes, the symposium is very easy. Just go onto the Alltech website and you'll see a dozen ways in which it links to the one ONE. One is the name that we've been using for the last few years for the Alltech Symposium, and that reflects obviously the unity that we believe between the food business, the agricultural business, and the crop business in terms of where we go forward. But most importantly, alltech.com, ALLTCH.com, and you'll find cross links then to the one conference. It's very easy to sign up for it. And if you have any difficulty, please contact your local Alltech office, and we'll be only too delighted to make sure that you're in attendance. I will re-emphasize the same thing again, Jenny. I just think that there is no other conference like it out there.
I concur. We are at the end of our time slot. And again, thank you for making the time to chat. As always, I've enjoyed the conversation. How can people follow you on social media?
Well, I focused on Twitter and LinkedIn. I appreciate some people do Instagram and Facebook, but those for me have been two very professional ways of getting messages out there. And once a month I write a blog on LinkedIn. I usually cross-link it, of course, over to Twitter as well. So that from the perspective of ideas that I see that I think are going to be important for agriculture, the blogs are a little bit longer, maybe 2,000 words long, but try to dig into more depth on those subjects. And those, of course, can also be seen on the Alltech website. They carry the same blogs. I have also believed I'm very fortunate to travel the world. We started off talking about that. This morning I was in the Netherlands. Yesterday I was in Russia. 2 days ago I was in Taiwan, and 4 days ago in China. I'm seeing a lot about what's happening with food. I'm seeing a lot of ways in which animals are producing that food. Farming is farming the land. And most importantly, the messaging around how food is produced. And sometimes you can learn a lot from these other countries. And I'm traveling to perhaps about 50 countries a year. So I put pictures and ideas and things I see onto my Twitter page. My Twitter, which is Aidan Connelly 1, that account is, I think, a great way for people who want to see a little bit about what I'm seeing about the world. And then for the longer, more in-depth pieces, certainly follow me on LinkedIn. You know, I think that the materials that we've been putting together have been really, really good. And part of what you've described is true, that it's very, very enjoyable to write something and then to see how that starts to play out in real life, how people either, hopefully by reading some of what you write, but also maybe you've just managed to catch the wave just before it hits the beach.
Yes, just like I said in the beginning about the one symposium, it's similar to looking into a crystal ball, if you will. I encourage all of the listeners to head over to both Twitter and LinkedIn and become connected with Aiden and the rest of the world. Once again, thank you so much.
Enjoyed it as always. Look forward to seeing you in Lexington in a few weeks' time.